podcast. This is Mr. White.
And Mr. Johnson. Not.
No. What's your name again?
Sadler.
Mr. Sadler. He's visiting the Conceptual Physics podcast.
Right on.
Mr. Sadler's usually he's a regular on the regular physics podcast. But today we're here to talk about your Section 2 investigation as it relates to Newton's first law. And so one reason why I really like this curriculum is because we get to revisit ideas and make sure that we have a full grasp of them before we take a final exam. And we're talking about car safety right now. So how does the first law relate to car safety? But before we get there, we want to talk about the 3 collisions in an accident.
So when you get into an accident, there's 3 collisions?
Yeah. And
So the first one's easy. The
Yeah.
car runs into the telephone pole.
Okay, so car hits object, whatever that might be. Okay, it could be something.
Car hits car
Car
hits
hits-
telephone pole.
Car hits sign, car hits mailbox. It could be a lot of things.
Okay.
Okay, that's collision number 1. Collision number 2, of course, is you hit car.
You hit car.
Yeah.
So that's why you wear your seatbelt, so your head doesn't hit the car. Something grabs you.
Yeah, so and we're going to talk about the seatbelt. The seatbelt, you run into the seatbelt. And the seatbelt is,
Trying to keep you attached to the car.
yeah.
Because if you're thrown from the car, that's bad.
That is bad. That is correct. And then the third collision, no one thinks about this collision. After you're in a car wreck, are you physically sore, Mr. Sadler?
Yeah, I think they call it internal injuries,
Yeah,
don't they?
you have internal injuries. And what happens is your insides run into your outsides. So insides run into outsides. So,
So your organs sort of get shaken up.
yeah, your organs physically get jostled around. They run into like your abdomen wall. Your heart and your lungs actually run into your rib cage. Your brain actually runs into your skull. That's bad.
That's bad.
So these are the 3 collisions. We're going to talk specifically about seatbelts. Let's see. If you're going to be in an accident, okay, first of all, Chapter 1, we begged you guys to slow down when you're driving in your car to avoid the accident. But if you're going to be in an accident, there's nothing that you can do about car hits object.
Right.
You don't have the reaction time. We proved that in Chapter 1. There's nothing you can do about your insides running into your outsides. Now,
Right.
you can affect the rate that happens, which we'll be talking about, but that's going to happen. You can determine which part of your body hits the car, and that's really important. We'll talk about this with more detail, but years ago, the interior of cars was very shiny,
Unpadded.
unpadded, looked really nice. I can remember a station wagon that an aunt or an uncle had, wooden paneling inside everywhere. And it was actual wood. It wasn't plastic wood. It wasn't fake wood. It was wood. And I'm sure they paid a lot of money to have that nice interior.
Right.
You can find pictures of cars from the 1950s that had metal studs on the dashboard to give that car that really pretty shine, but not safe.
Right.
So what you can affect is what part of you hits the car, and what the car manufacturers can affect is which part of the car you hit. So it can be something a little softer with a little more give, and so on. So we're going to talk about the first law as it relates to seatbelts.
So the first law is an object in motion tends to remain in motion.
So that's part 1 of the first law. Things come in 3s today. Object in motion
Tends to remain in motion.
stays in motion. Yeah, stays in.
So
motion.
when you drive in front of a train, the train doesn't stop immediately. It pushes your car right along.
Yeah.
Objects in motion stay in motion.
Objects at rest.
Stay at rest.
At rest. Stay at rest.
So if the stop sign is standing there and you run into it, it doesn't want to go.
No, and that's why there's damage to both your car and the stop sign. And then part 3, unless an outside force acts on the object.
And that's really what an accident is, right?
Yeah. And what does this have to do with seatbelts? Well, I'm recalling the investigation. And the investigation, we did a whole host of experiments with our clay people. And the first experiment was no seatbelt.
Right.
What was the result of that first experiment, Mr. Sadler?
Just like people with no seatbelts, they go flying forward off the cart or into the windshield in the real world.
Yeah, objects in motion stay in motion. Objects in your car that aren't belted or aren't attached become projectiles. So if you are the guy that has a lot of junk in your car, if you are in a very extreme accident, all of that stuff in your car goes flying forward, because remember, it's moving at 30 miles or 40 miles an hour too. Since it's not attached to the car, it's going to keep going at 30 or 40 miles an hour.
Right,
Mythbusters did this experiment where they showed this, and they were trying to talk about one of those Kleenex box holders, if that could actually hurt you. And they determined no. But then they got kind of silly, and they put a bowling ball where the back seat should be. That was devastating if that bowling ball, if you were in an accident with a bowling ball in the back seat. They got really silly, then they used a hatchet. That also didn't end very well for anybody in the front seat of the car.
Our biggest bowling ball is only 16 pounds. Imagine 10 times that, a 160-pound person sitting behind you without a seatbelt on.
When we go on vacation with my dog, the dog has his harness on, and we strap him in with the seatbelt, because I don't want my 60-pound black lab becoming my new buddy in the front seat. So,
Object in motion stays in motion.
yeah. The seatbelt, of course, is this outside force part. The seatbelt is the force that stops the object from continuing to move forward.
Just like in the Investigate, trying to tie the dummy to the car so he doesn't go flying forward.
Right. So what's important with the seatbelt, and they learned this, by the way, through trial and error, seatbelts need to be attached to the car. Let me be more specific. To the car's frame.
Something solid.
There was a time when they were just attached to the seat. And some accidents are so bad that the seat bolts actually break free from the car. And then, you're still attached to the seat, but the seat is moving forward. So now the seat belts are actually attached to the frame of the car. And that if the seat bolts, mounting brackets do break, then at least the seat belt is keeping you and the seat from becoming a projectile. That's a really extreme accident, but these sorts of things happen. What else did we notice about our seatbelts in the investigation?
Notice that the ribbon did a lot better than the wire.
So, ribbon is better than wire.
So obviously, if I was a motorsports driver, I wouldn't want to wear wire for a seatbelt.
Yeah, one of my student groups actually, if I remember this right, the crash happened and the wire seatbelt actually removed an arm from the clay figure. And so the question, of course, was, is that possible? And I said, yes. Yeah, it is possible. Wire is like a blade if the wire is thin enough. You start applying the large force of a car accident, and you have a very dangerous situation. So it's important. So what the wire does, the wire seatbelt or a thinner seatbelt cuts, whereas a ribbon seatbelt or a seatbelt that you're accustomed to seeing in your car bruises.
I guess this is just like a knife, really. You can cut with a knife in one direction, but if you turn it the other direction, the flat side.
That's exactly, I never thought about that. That's exactly what it is. And so the physics concept we're talking about here is pressure. And pressure is force over area. So if you were to actually do the equation, P is F over A.
Anyone who's ever seen high heels know this. You
Yeah.
walk home in tennis shoes and you walk across the grass, no problem. But you put on high heels and you walk across, ladies put on high heels, walk across the grass, and the heel sinks right in. Because it's the same force over a smaller area.
Right. So this is, you could be talking about high heels.
Eskimo
You could be talking about snowshoes.
snowshoes, yep.
So the snowshoes look kind of like the tennis rackets, right?
Right.
So even if the snow isn't compact enough to hold your weight, if you spread your weight, your force out over a larger surface area, then the pressure goes down. So it's important to note that a thicker seatbelt doesn't reduce the amount of force on the passenger.
Right. Force is the same,
But-
spreading it over a larger area. Just like the high heels or the snowshoes, the person's weight is the same. I'm spreading it over
Right.
a larger area.
It's exactly the same concept. So what this brings me to, I believe it's Ford or GM, I can't remember. They are now manufacturing seatbelts with airbags. Now, there's a lot of trends that you'll see come and go in car safety. It'll be interesting to see if this one lasts. So as the car is in an accident, there's these little tiny airbags inside of the seatbelt, and they actually pop out, and they increase the surface area even more of the seatbelt, because as some of us have talked about in class, seatbelts are actually made for very few people. In my class, we talked about men that are men, not made for women, between 5'10", like 6'2", 170 to 225 pounds. That's a very small segment of the population. They do keep us safe, but the way the seatbelt is currently designed, they can cause injuries. But I want to be totally clear on this. It's important to wear it because it keeps you inside of the car.
Right. I don't want to say that it's always women. Guys do it too. They get into the car and they take the seatbelt off their shoulder and put it underneath their shoulder because it bothers their shoulder.
Right.
Yeah. Just wait until you get into an accident. See how much it bothers you.
It's uncomfortable, but it's a necessary evil, actually. So we'll see if this fad lasts. It should reduce, first of all, no cutting risk here, and it should reduce the amount of bruising because you've increased the surface area.
Correct.
So in 10 years, this might be the standard, or it could be something that goes away, kind of like the seatbelt that was mounted to the door frame. Mm-hmm. So as you would open the door, the seatbelt would open, close as the door closed. That didn't last very long.
Maybe it wasn't as safe as the regular one too.
Yeah, there must have been a very good reason for that. So I believe that covers seatbelts, the first law, and 3 collisions. Signing off, this is Mr. White.
And Mr. Sadler.